Well, let's bring in now Crown Court reporter for the Liverpool Echo, Adam Everett, who joins me now and has been following this case since the start. First of all, what's been the reaction amongst the community in Liverpool to this verdict today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously when at the time of the murder, it came in a period when there were a spate of shootings really in the city, and a spate of fatal shootings, sadly. And obviously when we think back to that period in summer last year, it would have been one that was incredibly troubling for residents, in particular given the nature of some of them. Some women and children killed in their own homes. It's scary, to be honest with you. So to see justice being brought to the people responsible, not just the gunman, but also the driver and two of the people behind the shooting as well. I think it's just it's reassuring to know that the people who are responsible for this have been brought to justice and are potentially going to be looking at north of 30 years behind bars.
Yeah, and you could say that the person that helped bring about this conviction the most is Ashley herself, because there was a huge amount of voice notes that she sent to various friends that were produced in this trial, of evidence of the background, the evidence of this feud between her then boyfriend and the men responsible for her death.
Yeah, it was a highly unusual feature of the case, really. I've certainly not come across it before, and I think the detective who we spoke to as well haven't come across it before, where a murder victim's voice notes, her own messages, have revealed the motive for her murder and also helped to catch her murder. They essentially revealed that there was a feud between Ashley's boyfriend, Lee Harrison, and Niall Barry, who was one of the four men who were convicted of murder this afternoon. It was quite a little bit of a historic feud. It dated back about 3 years or so, drugs-related feud. And essentially, Ashley was describing in her voice notes the anxiety that she was feeling as the row became more and more heated. There were threats made by Niall Barry, which Ashley was describing to her friends over WhatsApp.
Yeah,
and it was this that helped the prosecution get a good grip of what was going on behind the scenes here, and ultimately what led to Ashley's fatal shooting.
Yeah, it must have been so hard for people in the courtroom to hear her voice, especially her family, but, vital evidence in these convictions today. Just, Adam, if you wouldn't mind a wider note about Liverpool gun crime and drugs. You mentioned at the start of our interview, the backdrop to this particular case is the problem of gun violence in Liverpool.
Yeah, I think what we've got to remember is that leading up to that period in August last year, when there were the 3 fatal shootings, there was a period of more than 12 months when there wasn't a single firearms discharge in Liverpool that resulted in a fatality. So I think we've got to remember that it was a flare-up, and there were a couple of other incidents towards the back end of last year as well. Of course, we'll remember Ellie Edwards, who was shot dead on Christmas Eve outside a pub on the Wirral. But I think you've got to view these things in a wider picture, really. It was an alarming period for the city to see that many fatalities as a result of gun violence. But I think since the back end of last year, they probably have seen another decrease again, and we've got to hope that continues, really. And I think it just goes to the nature of the shocking nature of the incidents, really. I think it's really shocked people, and I think it's I think we see this decrease has been a direct result of just how appalling those crimes were at the back end of last year.
OK, Adam Everett from the Liverpool Echo, their Crown Court reporter, thank you so much for talking to us about the case of Ashley Dale, of 4 men convicted of her murder today. Thank you. Now, the government's former chief scientific advisor has painted a rather bleak picture of Boris Johnson's handling of the pandemic. Sir Patrick Vallance told the COVID inquiry today that the former Prime Minister was clearly bamboozled by the science and at times seemed broken. Sir Patrick also gave a damning assessment of the government's Eat Out to Help Out scheme, saying it was highly likely to have increased COVID deaths in the UK. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has this report.
Rishi Sunak's hugely controversial Eat Out to Help Out scheme was introduced to save Britain's economy. But the then Chancellor's move, encouraging people to leave their homes during a pandemic and most likely driving the surge in infections, was never put to the country's chief scientific advisor.
The whole truth, nothing but the truth. I think it would have been very obvious to anyone that this was likely to cause inevitably would cause an increase in transmission risk.
Sir Patrick was tasked with leading the country's scientific response to the health crisis.
Next slide, please.
But he was faced with a Prime Minister who struggled with the data and who himself could not follow the science. Sir Patrick kept a diary at the time. In it, he says, 5 hours of meetings with the PM looked broken, head in hands a lot. He then quotes Boris Johnson as saying, "Is it because of the great British libertarian nation we are that it spread so much? Maybe we are licked as a species. We are to get our act together."
The message that we get from these repeated entries appears to describe something, at least as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, more serious, a repeated failure to understand graphs, scientific concepts and so on.
Well, I think I'm right in saying that the Prime Minister at the time gave up science when he was 15. And I think he'd be the first to admit it wasn't his forte.
Sir Patrick told the inquiry that as it became obvious the virus was spreading faster than previously feared, he found himself increasingly isolated and left out of key decision-making meetings. He wrote, "PM meeting begins to argue for letting it, COVID, all rip, saying yes, there will be more casualties, but so be it. They've had a good innings." DC, that's Dominic Cummings, says Rishi thinks just let people die and that's okay. This all feels like a complete lack of leadership. He goes on to say, the right-wing press are culpable and we have a weak, indecisive PM. The start of the pandemic was clearly a very difficult time for Sir Patrick Vallance, faced with government leaders who were pushing back against imposing restrictions too quickly. But even later on, ahead of the next lockdown, Sir Patrick Vallance was faced with a Prime Minister who wanted to let the virus run through the general population. Sir Patrick's testimony chimes with earlier evidence presented to the inquiry that describes the chaos and ineffective leadership at the heart of government. But perhaps as the government's chief scientific advisor during a pandemic, it is all the more damning. Ashish Joshi at the COVID inquiry.
Now, with 2 days to go until the autumn statement, the Prime Minister has given a pretty big hint of what we can expect. In a speech earlier today, Rishi Sunak said the time had come to turn attention to cutting tax. This is after meeting his pledge to halve inflation. Well, the PM has been under pressure to reduce the tax burden, which is currently at a 70-year high ahead of the next election. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates reports.
OK, here we go. Right, we're in business.
The two men attempting to fix the British economy. It's been hard graft. The PM says that it's now starting to pay off. And just in time, he needs a good story to tell. A speech to reassure impatient critics and a warning to those who say this should be easy.
I believe in cutting taxes, but doing that responsibly is hard. And I can't click my fingers and suddenly wish away all the reasons that taxes had to increase in the first place.
The country's tax burden is at a 70-year high. This week, that will begin to ease for some.
Now that inflation is halved and our growth is stronger, meaning revenues are higher, we can begin the next phase. It will take discipline, but over time, we can and we will cut taxes.
Rishi Sunak wants the credit for tax cuts that'll be spelt out by the Chancellor on Wednesday. Downing Street's argument is that the economic backdrop has changed. Inflation is down, but still high, and the rest of the picture is far from rosy. Growth from July to September, 0. And debt as a share of the economy, 95.3% in January, now up to 97.8% in September.
What matters more than the economics is the politics. Rishi Sunak desperately needs to change the dial with Wednesday's autumn statement. After the confusion over his conference speech, an underwhelming King's speech, according to many on his own side, and a reshuffle that left lots of noses out of joint. This could be his government's last big set piece before Christmas. Backbench Tories tell me the Prime Minister and Chancellor need to use it to show whose side they're really on.
Want to make sure that actually the long-term trajectory is to this lower tax burden on all households across our nation, because if that doesn't happen, then simply people will feel the squeeze continue for longer and they'll start to look elsewhere for their vote.
That very opposition backing tax cuts too.
But I would say to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, you've had 13 years, we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. This is too little and too late.
Jay, what do you think? Is this about right?
Tax cuts the foundation for a big rebuilding job. But will people like the finished product? Sam Coates, Sky News.
And we'll bring you full coverage of the autumn statement on Wednesday with all the build-up and analysis here on Sky News from 11 a.m. I'm going to be live in Macclesfield throughout the day, including a special version of the UK Tonight. The mother-in-law of Scotland's First Minister says the experience of being trapped in Gaza has changed her life forever. Elizabeth El Nakla and her husband Majed were visiting family when they became stuck in Gaza as the conflict erupted. She's been telling Sky News that she feared they would die every day they remained stranded in the Strip. Elizabeth and her daughter Nadia have been speaking exclusively to Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby.
Trapped in a war zone, the mother-in-law of Scotland's First Minister was in Gaza when Hamas launched its attack on Israel and the bombardment of Gaza then began. She didn't know if she'd get out alive.
This will be my last video. Everybody from Gaza is moving towards where we are. Where's humanity? Where's people's hearts in the world?
Thankfully, Elizabeth did make it out, reunited with her daughter Nadia. The moment she finally made it through the Rafah crossing, one of hope, but also heartbreak.
Your name's on the list and you're into Egypt. How did it feel?
It didn't feel real until they processed our papers in Egypt, which took 3.5 hours. So then I knew they can't send me back. I'm safe. And you're so tired. I hadn't slept for 48 hours. I hadn't slept for nearly 3 weeks. And you're just so relieved, but you still don't believe it. It's such a relief. You can't imagine. But again, your heart is torn. I left my heart in Gaza. I didn't bring it home with me.
The Gaza she left behind now uninhabitable, much of its population displaced and thousands killed.
Do you think in all of this, it's possible that we can get to a two-state solution where both people in Gaza, people in the West Bank and Israeli people can live in peace? Can you see a way through?
To be honest, on a personal level, my mind can't go forward. I'm stuck day by day that I don't know if my family are going to live and whether Palestine's going to exist. For me to think about what happens after the war when we're not hearing of a ceasefire, my mind can't go forward because it feels like we're being erased from the world.
Do you think you'll be able to go back one day? Can you imagine that? Could you ever go back?
There's nothing to go back to. There's no schools, there's no university, there's no bread shops. They even hit the chicken farms. There's no food. And I would love to go back to Gaza and I would love my family to be safe there. But I think there is nothing to go back to.
Beth Rigby, Sky News, Dundee.
And you can watch Beth's full interview with Hamza Yousaf's wife and mother-in-law at 9:30 here on Sky News. Still to come on the UK Tonight, the Mayor of London blocks an application from Madison Square Garden to build a London version of the Las Vegas sphere. Also ahead, the former Prime Minister, Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton, is introduced to the House of Lords. And how a penniless pool player became a bronze medalist at the European Championships after winning the lottery.
Breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. Here's what's coming up. We'll be discussing school inspections after an inquiry calls for transformational change amid claims Ofsted is not fit for purpose. And the noise complaint that silenced a 200-year-old tradition. We'll be hearing from the man who's campaigning to bring back North Ayrshire's chimes. But first, we're going to take a look at some of the other stories making news in the UK tonight. A woman has been critically injured in a dog attack in south-east London. Police were called out at 9 o'clock this morning following reports of an incident inside a property in Belvedere near Bexley Heath. The Metropolitan Police said that the woman was taken to hospital by paramedics, where she remains in a critical condition. A man also suffered minor injuries. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a woman in her 20s died in West Yorkshire. Officers were called to a property on Dearnley Street in the Ravensthorpe area of Dewsbury on Sunday night. West Yorkshire Police said a woman in her 20s was found seriously injured at that property and she later died. A 35-year-old man has been arrested following a large-scale search for a named suspect in what the police are calling a domestic-related incident. David Cameron has officially taken his seat in the House of Lords, where he will go by the title of Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton. The Foreign Secretary wore the traditional scarlet robes during his short introduction, where he swore the oath of allegiance to the King. The former PM had to be made a Lord in order to serve as Foreign Secretary, as he is no longer an MP. Lord Cameron's new title reflects his long-held ties to the Cotswold town of Chipping Norton, which lies within his former constituency of Witney. A multi-vehicle fire caused the closure of the M6 in Staffordshire this morning. Traffic was stopped between junction 14 for Stafford and junction 15 for Stoke-on-Trent. That's after a van fire spread to a car transporter. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, and the fire is believed to have been started accidentally. The bells of Beath Church in North Ayrshire have sounded every hour of every day for more than 200 years. That was until last week. The 24-hour ringing at the parish church has been stopped after one resident complained to the council that their sleep was being disturbed. But now other residents are chiming back with a local petition launched to try and restore the hourly bells in the clock tower. Well, I'm joined now by the man behind that petition. He is Brian McWilliams. Brian, a very good evening to you. 200 years of history coming to an abrupt end. Tell me what happened.
Well, I've lived close to the church for 23 years and you get used to the chime. And I noticed 2 weeks ago they weren't chiming, so I actually assumed that perhaps there was a fault. And then I posted on the local media page what's going on with the church bells. And I was told that a new resident had complained and they had been stopped. I therefore investigated further, heard that this was probably true, and therefore decided to launch a petition to have it reinstated, chiming on the hour, every hour, 24 hours a day. So far, the petition is just over 1,500 names. And I believe it's going to be discussed by the church session on Wednesday evening, where hopefully they will reverse the decision.
Brian, how much does the hourly chime mean to the local community? Because there's the obvious fact, it's a marker of time. So you know when your hour's up, I'm sure, people taking their kids to school or going to work. But it's about more than that, isn't it? It's about more than timekeeping to the local community.
Yes, it's part of the fabric of the community. You get used to the chime. You wake up during the night, you think, oh, ding dong too. Oh, I've got another few hours before I wake up. It's simple wee things. They disappear into nothing until you realise it's stopped, and that's what's happened. And for me, it's quite emotive. My bed's probably about 30 metres for the bells, so I'll hear them more than most, to be honest.
And Brian, have you any idea who this one resident is? Because, perhaps it is someone new to the area, as has been suggested, who doesn't quite get the significance and perhaps hasn't gotten used to them, because everyone else, it seems, it's just part and parcel of the daily life, even in the middle of the night.
The complainant is anonymous, will remain anonymous. I know I've spoken to many people, there's lots of people with ideas of who it might be, but far be it for me to mention any person, and I certainly wouldn't blame any person. All I'm saying is I would like a reinstatement of what has gone on for a long time.
Yeah, I'm only asking you not to name them publicly, but you just think if you could reason with them, have a chat with them, you might be able to actually get them to change their mind and sign the petition. Brian, look, best of luck with it. It's a huge part of your community there in Beath. We'll follow your progress and find out how you get on. That's Brian McWilliams there, talking about the bells of the local church that have stopped chiming after 200 years. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Now, take a look at this behind me. You might recognise it. The Mayor of London has rejected an application to build a version of this. This is the Las Vegas Sphere. There were plans to build it in the capital in Stratford. It's an entertainment venue. It's earmarked for the site at the Olympic Park in Stratford. But the project raised some eyebrows among residents and local officials, mostly because of the expected light pollution. Well, let's bring in Alice Porter, who's been following this story. Alice, it is quite the spectacle. I've been following this online. I didn't know anything about it until I saw videos online of U2, the band, doing a concert inside it and the incredible optics of it. But I didn't realise that outside it looks like this, and you can project many different things onto it. And a lot of people will have seen it globally because, of course, the F1 Grand Prix at the weekend in Vegas. I mean, look at this, the Halloween spectacle.
It's extraordinary, and there's no doubt it could really change the landscape of London. I suppose the question is do people want it changing it in such a dramatic way? Some people love it, some people hate it. Now, the proposed site is very much where the Olympics took part, and it's now a disused car park. So I can see why this company from the US Sphere Entertainment thought, look, this is a perfect place to put a giant orb, which would be, of course, extraordinary from the outside. It can change different colours, you can have adverts on it, you can have all sorts of incredible designs from the outside. And on the inside, it would have up to 21,000 people for a sporting venue, for shows, for entertainment. Potential for lots of jobs, lots of investment in London. That was very much the hope of it. But I think, crucially, London isn't Las Vegas, and this is where people live.
It looks great there. It looks great in Vegas. Would they wear it in Stratford, as it were?
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of flats around, a lot of residential areas, and people who are there would be quite, I think, concerned about the constant flashing of the different lights. And so that many people came together and put a petition together. But I think it is important to stress, we saw quite a similar opposition when there was the Millennium Dome, for example. People love it now. But of course, we've now had the Mayor for London wading on this, and he has now, as of today, made it very clear he's concerned particularly about the light pollution and the green credentials of it as well. It's quite a big electricity bill that we would expect for this.
Yeah, OK, Alice, thank you very much. It's so impressive, but perhaps not one for London. OK, Alice, thank you. We'll follow the progress of that story, of course, here on Sky News. Still to come on the UK tonight, calls for a major overhaul of the school inspection system. I'm going to be talking to a former strategy director at Ofsted and a secondary school teacher. That's coming up next. And winter is coming for Northern Ireland's most famous trees as the Game of Thrones dark hedges get the chop. Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. Now, Ofsted school inspections have been branded not fit for purpose in a new report calling for major reform. The investigation was commissioned by the National Education Union following the death of Ruth Perry, a head teacher who took her own life following an Ofsted inspection. Well, I'm joined now by the former strategy director of at Ofsted, Luke Trill, along with a secondary school teacher, Amy Clark. She teaches English and is also the president of the Norfolk branch of the National Education Union. Good evening to you both. Thank you so much for coming onto the UK Tonight to talk about this. Luke, I'll come to you first, if I may. This new report was pretty damning in its assessment. It said Ofsted is seen as toxic and isn't fit for purpose. Is that something you recognise about the school watchdog?
Not at all. Obviously, inspection can always be improved. But if you look, firstly, at the results of Ofsted inspections, around 90% of schools are graded good or outstanding. Now, that doesn't look to me like the hallmark of a sort of punitive regime. But we also know that, in the education system, it's really important that we know how schools and colleges are doing. We need to have an accurate picture of what's happening, and we need that for government when they need to take action when things aren't going well. But also parents deserve to have that accurate picture as well, so they can make choices about their children's education. So no one likes having an inspection or doing a test or being assessed, but it's a really important part of the system. And I think what today's report misses, I think what it gets wrong is that whilst obviously an inspection causes stress, what it gives us in terms of being able to hold schools to account, being able to ensure high standards, far outweighs that.
Amy, put us in the picture. What's it like from a teacher's point of view? Because we hear about the stress. We've heard recently about the tragic case of the head teacher who took her own life after an Ofsted inspection. That very much put Ofsted in the headlines and has seen it under scrutiny. But Ofsted says 9 out of 10 schools say that their inspections help them improve.
Yeah, so I mean, from a teacher's point of view, Ofsted inspections are incredibly stressful. I also don't agree that a 2-day visit for most secondary schools in particular really gives an accurate snapshot about what it's like in schools. It's highly pressurised for teachers. There's lots of work that goes on in the background in preparation for Ofsted, such as learning walks, because schools are so scared about that one-word final grading, which can ruin schools and the communities and have an impact on the children.
Amy, can I just interrupt there? Because something that comes up quite a lot is the fact that Ofsted inspections are sprung on teachers. So you might be given 2 days, 24 hours notice at most, and then it's all about teachers preparing. But other people will ask, well, hang on a second, a school should be inspected when it's not ready to look at its best, so you get an accurate portrayal of what that school is like on any given day.
Indeed, I mean, anybody who has children will know that children aren't predictable. They can be unpredictable. I mean, it's not that we're against being inspected, because obviously issues such as safeguarding are incredibly important. And I would be really concerned if those things weren't looked at. But it's the regime that in a 2-day inspection, the inspectors feel that they have an overall picture of schools. But that's impossible, really, because schools change on a day-to-day basis. Some things such as, so some schools might have high absence rates if, for example, there's a higher proportion of certain demographics of children, particularly in poor areas as well, where there can be higher absence rates. That's not taken into account. There's this one-size-fits-all approach, often from a very middle-class perspective, whereas it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach, because teaching the profession is not one-size-fits-all. We have to accommodate different demographics, but that is not what happens with Ofsted inspections.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point, Amy, and I'll put that to Luke. Luke, when was the last time Ofsted sort of reassessed how it measures success in schools? Because what Amy's saying is that there is a one-size-fits-all approach, and as we know, schools have changed over the last few decades in terms of free schools, grammar schools, schools for special educational needs. Has Ofsted kept up with the times? Is that where it needs to reform? You can't just have a 2-day inspection and know what a school's like. Maybe there should be more regular monitoring. But again, we know Ofsted has faced cuts, so it may not be able to offer that more complete service.
Well, look, absolutely, it's vital that the framework that Ofsted uses for inspection keeps up with the time. And one of the first things that the current chief inspector did when she came in was took a sort of root and branch review of that inspection framework. And one of the things she did that I think was really important was she said that actually there was becoming a bit too much focus on headline results at the expense of what was being taught, whether schools had this broad and rich curriculum alongside it as well. And one of the things which she has really pushed to do is to change inspection to make it much more of a conversation, so it can take account of some of those factors that we just heard about, because schools are different. But the alternative, I'm afraid, is either judging schools just by their results, which I don't think would be fair and would encourage gaming, or it would be some form of self-assessment, which this report proposes, which I'm afraid just won't cut muster with parents who will look at it and say, this is schools marking their own homework. And we know that's when things go wrong when it comes to regulation, when you don't have that outside challenge. Outside challenge that I should say all of the inspectors have a background in schools. They are educational professionals. They know what it's like. This isn't
Okay, I'm going to bring in Amy there, because she was shaking her head. I mean, there has been the suggestion of self-assessment with schools, and, you know, as Luke said there, that's a bit like marking your own homework. You think there does need to be some kind of independence in the process. But Amy, what will work best for you? Because we're talking about doing what's best for kids here. So do parents need to be involved more, the community? What would be an ideal system for you? Because it seems that Ofsted does need to be reformed, maybe not done away with completely, but there does need to be a change. What would be a better system for you?
So the report also says that it wouldn't just be schools. There would be an independent person involved in this, albeit so granted most schools are part of academy chains, so maybe getting another head teacher within that academy chain in or elsewhere. I definitely think a more collaborative approach between communities, parents and independent individuals, but I don't believe Ofsted is the answer. As the report says, and I agree with it, Ofsted is toxic. It's not fair to ruin a school based on a one graded judgment after 2 days. Something does need to change, but the report doesn't just say it's going to be schools marking themselves. I think that is a misconception about what that report actually says. That's part of it, but that is not that's not where the final decision comes from. There's a multi sort of person approach to it.
OK, Amy Clark and Luke Trill, thank you so much for talking to us about Ofsted, that report out. I think the one thing we can agree on is some changes need to be made, and that is the content of that report. Thank you so much for joining us on the UK Tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now, 6 trees at a Northern Ireland beauty spot made famous by the series Game of Thrones are being cut down. The dark hedges, which are a tunnel of beech trees near Armoy in County Antrim, became popular with tourists after featuring in the TV drama. But half a dozen of the trees are now getting the chop after they were found to be in a poor state, and they pose a safety risk to visitors. Sky's Island correspondent Stephen Murphy has this report.
Winter is coming, and so are the chainsaws. Workers start to remove an ancient beech from one of Northern Ireland's most photographed sites. To Game of Thrones fans, it's the King's Road. The dark hedges, a tunnel of beech trees here in County Antrim, shot to fame after this brief appearance in season 2 of the global hit series. But in the real world, the trees have real problems. Many are in poor condition, and now half a dozen must be felled to prevent them falling on tourists.
Over the next week, there will be 6 trees removed, but it'll be a slice-by-slice basis. You're not going to see somebody with a big axe shouting timber. It's difficult, so we're trying to chop down as little as possible and manage as well as possible.
When this imposing avenue was planted by a local landowner back in 1775, there were 150 of the beech trees. But in the decades since, many of them, like this one here, have fallen victim to old age or storms. When these works have been completed, there will be just 80 of the beech trees left standing. Campaigners say authorities have neglected to manage the site properly, and safety is a real issue.
There's still a lot of life left in the trees. They can last for quite a few years more, but you don't want a tourist trap to become a death trap.
Tourists arriving today were unaware of the tree's impending demise.
I mean, it's definitely a bummer, but better than someone getting hit by a falling tree. So
These are God's creations, so that's probably my biggest, like, bummer, recognizing the beauty of them. You know, that they were created, brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, and that for a while now, people are going to be able to enjoy them in their full beauty, so.
It's hoped the remedial works will help preserve the brooding and almost menacing stretch of Northern Irish roadway that's captured imaginations right around the world. Stephen Murphy, Sky News at the Dark Hedges.
Coming up on the UK tonight, after the break, I'm going to speak to the lottery winner who is now playing pool for England after spending his winnings on a table. And we'll have the rest of the day's sport, including an MP's call to have a parliamentary debate about Everton's points deduction.
John's parents brought him up to be Christian.
He was just like full of light. I had a little bit of a crush on him.
You couldn't have asked for a better young man. He reminds me of who I wanted to serve with.
He told me his plan was to go live in the middle of the jungle. It didn't sound that bad.
I thought that John would get accepted.
John's death captured the world's attention. It was a shocking story. This young American missionary killed on this remote island, driven to go there to share his faith, and the indigenous community that didn't receive him, that wanted to protect their small island. I think there was a mystery to what propelled John to go, and who is this tribe that we knew almost nothing about. They're described as uncontacted, but in fact they do have their own history. So we wanted to look behind the headlines and really try to understand how these two cultures and two people collided. I think that he was possessed of a radical faith. I think that he was an evangelical Christian. He interpreted the scripture and the Great Commission as a call to share his faith with the world. He spent 10 years actually planning this mission. It wasn't an impulsive act, a kind of reckless suicidal act that it had been described as in some news reports. It was a place that he discovered when he was a teenager. He was 16 and he found this island, and it was the most difficult and dangerous place to go in the world as a missionary. And he decided that this is what I want to do, to prove myself and to prove my faith. And he spent that 10 years preparing himself spiritually and physically. He trained his body, he trained his mind, and he had a lot of help actually. He wasn't working alone. He was part of this big infrastructure of missionary organizations and individuals who helped sharpen him. Well, the tribe was described as a kind of unknown, mysterious tribe in those initial news reports, but it turns out they do have a history of contact and problematic contact. The islands, the Andaman chain, which is between India and Thailand, was for a period overseen by a British colonial administrator who left an extraordinary history of his relationship with the tribe. But one of the things that he had done was kidnap members of this particular tribe and take them back to his home. And I think that history of contact, of death, actually looms over the tribe and their perception of outsiders.
Welcome back to the UK tonight. Coming up, I'm going to speak to the man from Stoke-on-Trent who won the lottery, bought a pool table and now plays for England. But first, Jules is here with the sport. That's going to be a good story. I'm looking forward to talking to him. Let's talk about Everton, this 10-point deduction. Now, this is controversial and it's got so heated, it's going to be talked about in Parliament.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the news broke on Friday, this 10-point deduction for breaching Premier League rules. They went straight into the relegation zone with immediate effect. We heard views from within the game over the weekend after the news on Friday. Today, it has got political, as you say. It's Ian Byrne, who's the MP for Liverpool West Derby. Now, he has tabled an early day motion in the House of Commons, so he wants it debated. He says the 10-point deduction is, quote, grossly unfair, says it punishes the fans. He also pointed out the more severe breaches, like the attempt by the 6 Premier League clubs to break away and join the Super League, which would have changed the face of the game, only resulted in financial punishments, no sporting sanctions. Most important, though, he's questioned the Premier League's ability to govern top-flight football fairly. He's accused them of having a cavalier approach, as he puts it, to points deductions, and he now wants the government to appoint this independent football regulator, which we've been talking about for a while. He wants this to happen immediately so they can judge the case for themselves, and he says until that happens, he thinks all the action against Everton should be suspended. So he's very, very strong on it.
Yeah, big changes like that in sport take a while to come about. The 10-point deduction, that happens pretty quick, though. But this will give the fans some hope, though. But it's about the timing, isn't it? Because the season continues, regardless of this drama. And, I mean, that could be quite a big bit of drama at the end of the season if this decision's reversed.
Well, that's it. It's so hard to know how long this is going to take. You know, we're nearly into December, getting towards the halfway point of the season by the busy Christmas period. So when will this happen? When will this appeal be heard? We know that Everton have until a week today, November the 27th, to lodge their appeal. Then, of course, the process will continue. That will be a new independent panel who will reconsider the evidence. They'll have a range of options open to them. They can either dismiss the appeal completely, they can alter the punishment, potentially, possibly to a lesser points deduction or maybe on a financial punishment instead. We just don't know. But it will take some time, without doubt, this process. We know the Premier League want it concluded by the end of the season, or else it will get very, very messy. Meanwhile, Everton, of course, haven't played since this news came out. They play on Sunday, Super Sunday, at home against Manchester United. And you hear the fans already are preparing to make their view very, very clear at Goodison Park on Sunday, which I think will be a little bit lively.
Indeed.
Away from Everton, it is a very busy night on the international football front. Let's bring you up to date.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Caroline Dubois, the new world champion. Caroline is going to take us through some of the women who really inspired her through her career so far. So Caroline, go and have a look.
Yep, let's go.
Caroline, Clarissa was not surprised when we were speaking before about who you were going to choose. Just tell me a little bit why you've chosen her.
I started boxing when I was 9 and I didn't have many role models. I didn't have many female boxers that I looked up to, admired, or even felt on a level where I could understand them and they could be someone that experiences are similar to mine. And I remember going up into squads and I was the only black girl there, and I just felt very insecure about how I looked, who I was. I was insecure about my muscles, how big I was compared to all the other girls, and I was insecure about so many silly little things, really, now that I look at it. But at the time, when you're 11, you're 12, you're 15, you know, that stuff, that gets you. And being able to see Clarissa Shields, I remember seeing her, and she was so big, so strong, so good. I remember being insecure about the fact that I was winning all the time. And then I seen Clarissa Shields, and she never lost. She only ever lost one fight. She went to every tournament, dominated. And I was like, it's okay being me. She wasn't afraid to tell people that she was the best. She wasn't afraid to say, okay, I'll walk into the room, you had the respect for me, and that's what I needed. Obviously, I'm not Clarissa Shields and I'm not gonna try and emulate her, but I'm just gonna try and emulate myself and be more confident in yourself.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Right, let's have a quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It's turning drier this week and less windy, but there'll still be some rain around, mainly in the north and east. England, Wales and the southeastern half of Scotland will be rather murky and damp this evening, while northwest Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland are looking mostly dry and clear. England and Wales will remain largely overcast and breezy tonight, with patchy rain dying out from the west. Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, will turn dry and calm with a patchy frost developing.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, we like to leave you with something weird and wonderful from around the UK, and today we are talking about the lottery. It is, of course, that question, what would you do if you won big? Well, my next guest quit his job, bought a pool table and has now won a bronze medal in the European Championships playing for England. He is Neil Jones and he joins me now. Neil, good evening to you.
Good evening.
So a big lottery win, we always wonder what we'd buy. How did a pool table come into the equation?
Well, to be honest, I used to play a lot of snooker back in the day, and I sort of fell out of love with it for a second, and I think it was about 8 years that I actually left my cue in the loft, and I went to the local pool hall just to watch some football, believe it or not, and then picked a cue up, and one of the guys said to me, do you fancy having a game? And I knocked a few in, and I progressed from there and went up to just playing in a normal little league, and then going for trials for county, then having a trial for England, which I wasn't very successful with, and then the next thing, COVID come along, and I was practicing, honing my skills, and then eventually going over to Wellingborough and trialling for an England black ball pool team and successfully getting through.
Yeah, well, congratulations to you, because the luxury of your big win was not just that you could afford a nice pool table, but that you could give up your job as well because you were a tiler. So you didn't buy your way to this success. You had the luxury of time to put in the hours, right?
Oh, for sure. Well, as anybody knows with any sport, you've got to dedicate yourself. When you see yourself getting a little bit better and you sort of progress up through the ranks, you're beating players that you really shouldn't be beating. Then I think that's when you give yourself a little pat on the back and you go, do you know what? I can actually do this. So you progress through the ranks, and then what comes. You know, you can just reach for the stars if you like, and obviously you've got to put them dedicated hours in.
Yeah, practice makes perfect, and you have the luxury of time and reach for the stars. You've got a bronze medal. What's next?
Well, to be honest with you, there's two competitions, and it's basically one's in Bridlington and one's in Malta, and you have to achieve 60% in each, or a total of 120% win rate. I achieved just under 100%, so it looks like I'm retrialing again. So it gives everybody a chance as well, you know. So
I think it's fair to say you're pretty good at pool, Neil. And talk to me about how else the lottery changed your life, because, you know, obviously you've been playing pool. Your wife, I read an interview with you where you said, you know, I get a chance to practice while my wife watches Coronation Street. Are you leading a pretty normal life other than this new career in pool?
I'm a totally grounded guy. You know, in Stoke-on-Trent, there's a fantastic standard of pool anyway, and you can't get above your station in this area because you've got your friends that'll just shoot you down. In other words, you know, you can't get above your station. You've just got to earn your respect, and that's all I've ever wanted out of pool, is just for somebody to say, do you know what, Neil Jones, he's a good player, and that's all I've ever wanted out of pool.
Oh.
And at the end, I've ended up with little gong there, so happy days.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Neil, you're not just a good player, you're a good bloke as well. Thank you so much for coming on to speak to us on the UK Tonight, and here's to your continued success.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Neil Jones, really good to speak to you. Thank you. Well, that's all from the UK Tonight. You can catch up on all the highlights, of course, on our webpage. You can scan the QR code on your screen as well. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.